So I want you to put yourself in a very specific place, in a very specific moment in time.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Right. So you are standing on a frozen shoreline. It is the dead of night. The year is 1969.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you are somewhere in the most, like, isolated, unforgiving reaches of the northern Alaskan coast, bordering the Chukchi Sea. And the temperature has plummeted to minus 40 degrees Celsius.
Which is, I mean, that's almost incomprehensible cold.
Exactly. I don't just mean it's chilly, you know. At that temperature, the cold isn't really a weather condition anymore. It's a physical, aggressive entity, like a predator.
Yeah, it's an environment where human biology is just actively being rejected by the planet. The air itself is hostile.
It really is. If you take a sharp breath in through your mouth, your lungs will physically ache. The moisture in your throat just freezes almost instantly.
Right.
Every time you exhale, your breath doesn't just fog, it literally crystallizes in the air around you, falling to the snow like these tiny microscopic shards of glass.
That's just a terrifying visual.
So you're standing there totally vulnerable, and around you there is total darkness. Plus, this suffocating, heavy silence.
The kind of quiet that hurts your ears.
Yes, the kind of absolute quiet that makes a ringing sound in your head because your brain is just desperately searching for an audio input that isn't there.
Right.
So you're looking out over an ocean that has frozen completely solid. And it's not a flat sheet of ice like a skating rink, you know? It's a jagged, chaotic wasteland of pressure ridges. These are blocks of ice the size of houses just shoved up against each other.
A completely dead landscape.
Exactly. And then suddenly, the thick, freezing fog rolling off the ice pack just begins to part. And out of the darkness, a massive, towering black shadow glides past you silently.
And we're not talking about a shadow cast by the moon. This is a physical mass.
Right, a physical mass. It is a 1,322-ton steel ship.
Just massive.
Yeah, and it's utterly consumed by rust. It's this decaying, floating monolith. There are no navigation lights on the mast. There is no low hum of a diesel engine.
No crew.
No crew on the deck. No captain at the wheel. It is entirely alone, navigating an unlivable, frozen environment with what looks like terrifying, deliberate intent.
Yeah, that's chilling.
It just slides through the ice, towering over you, and then, as quickly as it appeared, the fog shifts, the wind howls, and the darkness just swallows it whole.
I mean, what you are describing there sounds exactly like the opening sequence of an atmospheric horror film.
Mm-hmm.
It completely defies every logical, physical framework we have for how the mechanical world is supposed to operate.
It really does.
Because when we normally discuss maritime history in these deep dives, we are looking at engineering triumphs, or we're doing postmortems on tragic failures.
Right, like how a boiler exploded.
Yeah, or how a navigation error put a hole onto a reef. But what we are plunging into today is entirely different. It is not a standard historical recount.
No, not at all.
It is a highly documented, real-life horror story. It's an event that actually happened that left a massive paper trail in government archives, and yet it remains completely, deeply inexplicable.
And that is the core mission of our deep dive today. We are pulling our insights from this brilliant, highly detailed, and genuinely unsettling exploration by deep-sea Wahaja into the SS Baychimo.
The ship that categorically refused to die.
Exactly. We need to unravel how a broken, abandoned vessel survived for 38 years in the deadliest ocean environment on Earth. Because I just can't stop thinking about the psychological impact of a sighting like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what does it actually do to a seasoned sailor's mind to witness a physical impossibility, to see a massive piece of dead, rusted machinery moving through the ice like a phantom?
It completely shatters your baseline sense of reality. I mean, human beings are fundamentally pattern-seeking creatures, right? We rely on cause and effect.
Right.
We build heavy industrial machines. We control them with fuel and human input, and when they break, they stop.
Or they sink.
Or they sink. In the context of the ocean, they always sink. The ocean is the ultimate destroyer of human engineering. Saltwater corrodes, pressure crushes, and storms tear things apart.
Yeah, the ocean always wins.
Always. So to see a colossal steel structure, completely dead, without power, continuing to move and seemingly survive the crushing forces of the Arctic Ocean decade after decade.
It just triggers a very primal dread.
Exactly. It is the uncanny valley, but instead of like a humanoid robot, it's applied to an industrial behemoth. Your brain tells you, well, that is a machine. It requires a master. So if there is no human master, what is driving it?
It's almost like looking at a cryptid, you know.
A cryptid? Yeah, I can see that.
You hear folklore about monsters, Entities that seem to be hunting or just endlessly, patiently waiting in the desolate ice for someone to stumble upon them. That's what the Baychimo became to the people who saw it.
It wasn't just debris anymore.
No, it was an entity. But if we want to even begin to understand how it haunted the Arctic for nearly 4 decades, we can't start at the end. We need to rewind.
We have to go back to the beginning.
We need to go all the way back to 1914 to fully grasp the sheer hubristic scale of the machine we are actually dealing with here.
Yeah, 1914 is the crucial starting point for the psychology. This was the absolute zenith of the Second Industrial Revolution, right on the precipice of the First World War.
The era of big steel.
Exactly. Humanity was intoxicated by steel, coal, and steam. Think about the mindset of the era. The Titanic had sunk just 2 years prior, but rather than learning humility, naval architecture just doubled down.
They thought they could outbuild nature.
We believed we had finally definitively conquered nature through sheer mass and rivet strength. And out of that era of ultimate industrial arrogance, the SS Baychimo was forged.
In Sweden, right.
Built in a shipyard in Gothenburg, Sweden. It wasn't designed for luxury or speed. It was designed specifically to be an unstoppable beast of burden. 230 feet long, over 1,300 tons of raw steel.
Let's talk about that steel for a second, because it's not the same as modern shipbuilding, is it? We are talking about early 20th century metallurgy here.
That's a really vital point. The steel used in 1914 was often produced using the open hearth process. It had different carbon and sulfur contents compared to modern steel.
Which means what, exactly, for the ship?
Well, it actually made it quite brittle in extreme cold temperatures. It's a phenomenon called the ductile to brittle transition. Plus, ships weren't welded together seamlessly back then.
Oh, right, rivets.
Yeah, they were plated. They'd overlap massive sheets of steel and secure them with hundreds of thousands of iron rivets, driven in red hot by hand. It was an incredibly heavy, rigid structure.
So it's an absolute fortress, but a rigid one. And it wasn't just built to run standard safe shipping lanes between, say, New York and London. It was purchased by the Hudson's Bay Company.
Right.
And for anyone listening who might just know the name Hudson's Bay from the modern department stores with the striped blankets, we need to correct that scale immediately.
Oh, yeah. They were not just selling blankets.
Back then, the Hudson's Bay Company wasn't a retail chain. They were an empire unto themselves. They were incredibly powerful, essentially operating as a sovereign corporate entity in the northernmost, most brutal parts of the world.
They really were. Their entire business model relied on extracting extreme wealth from the most hostile environments on the planet.
So they needed a beast of a ship.
The Baychimo was purchased for a very specific, highly dangerous job: to navigate the terrifying, ice-choked trade routes of northern Canada and Alaska.
Places normal ships would never go.
Exactly. Its mission was to push through waters that would easily sink lesser ships to deliver vital, life-saving supplies. We're talking heavy clothing, rifles, ammunition, tools, tea, flour.
To trade with the indigenous communities?
Yes, to trade with extremely remote indigenous communities and solitary trappers scattered along the ice. And in exchange, the ship would be loaded with incredibly valuable animal furs: fox, seal, bear.
Which was big money back then.
Huge money. Millions of dollars worth of cargo in today's money, locked in the belly of this ship. The crew and the captain had to be the absolute best, hardened, cynical men who would push their steel hulls through the ice year after year, fully knowing the risks.
They essentially carved their own paths through the ocean, dropping anchor in places where a normal vessel wouldn't even dare look at a map. And they did this successfully for years. The Baychimo was super reliable.
Until it wasn't.
Right. Until we hit October of 1931. The Baychimo has just completed a massive trading run. The hold is loaded down with an absolute fortune in furs. The ship is sailing toward Barrow, Alaska.
And this is where the hubris of a 1,300-ton steel machine violently collides with the raw, unfiltered physics of the Arctic environment.
So break down October in the Arctic for us. Why is it so bad?
October in the Alaskan Arctic is the turning point of the entire global ecosystem, and it is objectively the deadliest time to be on the water.
Because it's freezing over.
It is the transition period where the ocean literally begins to turn into a solid. And we need to explain how sea ice actually forms, because it's not like an ice cube tray in your freezer.
Right, it's not a quiet process.
Not at all. As the temperature drops below -2 degrees Celsius, which is the freezing point of salt water, the surface of the ocean begins to form what's called fissile ice. It looks like a slushy, almost oily film. The water gets thick.
Right, it stops moving like water and starts moving like syrup.
Exactly. Then wind and wave action compress that slush into pancake ice. These circular disks that bump into each other. Eventually, these freeze together into a massive solid sheet.
And that sheet is moving.
Yes, this is the critical part. Ocean currents and howling surface winds are constantly pushing this solid sheet against the landmass. Millions of tons of ice are forced together.
Which creates ridges, right?
When two massive sheets of ice collide, they don't just gently stop. They crush into each other, violently buckling upward and downward, creating pressure ridges.
Which are huge.
These are jagged walls of ice that can be 30 feet high above the water and plunge 100 feet down below the surface. When a ship gets caught between two shifting plates of sea ice forming a pressure ridge, the lateral forces applied to the hull are beyond human comprehension.
Just crushing power.
It can bend solid steel girders like wet cardboard.
I want to focus on that feeling for a second because I'm trying to put myself on the deck of that ship. We look at a 230-foot steel vessel and we think of it as invincible, like a floating fortress.
Yeah, our brains associate steel with absolute safety.
But against an ocean that is actively turning from a liquid into a solid and pushing with the combined weight of a frozen continent, wasn't this essentially putting a tin can into an industrial hydraulic vise?
That is the perfect mechanical analogy. A tin can in a hydraulic vise. Captain John Cornwell and his experienced crew suddenly found themselves entirely, hopelessly helpless.
Just stuck.
The Baychimo's massive steam engines were churning with all their might, burning coal to turn the propeller, but the ship couldn't move an inch forward or backward.
Because the slush turned to concrete.
The Brazil slush had turned to pack ice, and the pack ice had locked like concrete around the steel hull. And here is where the psychological terror truly begins to set in. You are trapped. The engines are running, but you are a prisoner.
And it's getting dark.
The sun is beginning its winter retreat, meaning the daylight is shrinking down to just a few hours a day. The darkness is stretching longer, and the ambient temperature is plummeting by the hour.
And what's even worse, they can't even stay inside the ship.
No, they couldn't.
The deep dive sources note that as the ice pressure increased, Captain Cornwell realized the hull could rupture at literally any moment. If they were below deck when the steel gave way, the freezing water would flood the compartments in seconds.
Trapping them inside a sinking iron tomb.
Right. So the crew had to evacuate their state-of-the-art vessel. They had to haul timber out onto the shifting, freezing sea ice and physically build flimsy wooden huts on the nearby frozen shoreline.
That's just bleak.
Imagine the creeping dread of that situation. You are sitting in a hastily constructed wooden shack. The wind is howling through the unsealed planks. You are freezing, you are rationing food, and you are just staring out a tiny window at the ice, watching your massive 1,300-ton lifeline being slowly, methodically squeezed by the ocean.
The sensory details of that weight must have been just agonizing. I mean, ice under extreme pressure does not sit quietly.
It makes noise.
Right? It is highly vocal. It groans. It shrieks like tearing metal. The crew, sitting in the dark in those huts, would have heard the relentless, deafening acoustic transmission of the Baychimo's hull fighting the ice.
Like a slow-motion car crash.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because water and ice transmit sound far more efficiently than air. The screech of the rivets popping, the steel plates buckling and groaning as they compressed, it would echo across the ice field like explosions.
Wow. Every pop of a rivet is just another reminder of where you are.
Every sound was a visceral reminder that they were entirely cut off from the rest of humanity. If the ship bursts open and goes to the bottom, they have no long-range radio. They have no shelter strong enough to survive the deep winter.
And no one is coming for them.
Absolutely no hope of a rescue ship reaching them because the ocean is solid.
It's the ultimate form of isolation. You are literally watching your only ticket home being slowly tortured to death by the environment. And the tragic irony here is that the crew thought the ice was the worst thing that could happen to them.
They had no idea.
Their entire focus, their anxiety, was fixated on the pressure on the hull, but they were looking at the wrong threat. Because the ice was just the trap.
Right. The trap just holds you still.
The real nightmare was about to blow in from the dark.
Yes. We move into November of 1931. The crew has been living in these miserable huts for weeks, enduring the waiting game, listening to the ship groan, and then an unprecedented, violent blizzard strikes the Alaskan coast.
And when we say unprecedented,
when the historical documents and the source material use the word unprecedented, we need to calibrate our understanding of that word. The local Alaskan elders in the region, indigenous people who had lived in this extreme environment their entire lives.
People who know the weather better than anyone.
Exactly. People who possessed generations of accumulated knowledge regarding severe weather patterns. They stated they had never, in their entire lifetimes, witnessed a storm of this magnitude.
The details from the source are genuinely terrifying. The winds were catastrophic. We are talking hurricane-force velocities, but it's not blowing rain. The wind is carrying millions of razor-sharp ice crystals.
A blinding whiteout.
It's a blinding, deafening whiteout. The barometric pressure dropped and the temperature fell so drastically that if you stepped outside, your body would immediately begin to fail. The source specifically notes that simply breathing caused the lungs to physically burn.
Let's break down the biology of why that happens, because it really highlights how close to death they were.
Yeah, please.
When you inhale air that is 40 or 50 degrees below zero, your body attempts to rapidly warm and humidify that air before it reaches the delicate tissues of your lungs.
But the air is moving too fast.
Right. In extreme wind-driven cold, the air strips the moisture from your respiratory tract so violently that it causes microcellular damage to the trachea and bronchi. Your airways undergo a severe bronchospasm.
They just seize up.
They contract forcefully to prevent the lethal cold from reaching the deep alveoli. It literally feels like you are inhaling fire or inhaling broken glass.
That sounds horrible.
And your body's reflex is to choke, to stop you from breathing at all. So to be trapped in a hastily built wooden shack while that kind of meteorological violence screams outside is the purest definition of claustrophobia.
You can't even open your eyes.
You can't see past the palm of your hand. The roar of the wind completely drowns out human speech, and you are constantly acutely aware that if the roof tears off or a wall blows in, every single man in that room will freeze to death in a matter of minutes.
And this blizzard doesn't just pass in a few hours, it rages on for several agonizing days.
Days in the dark.
The men are huddled together in the dark, essentially just waiting to die, surviving hour by agonizing hour. Finally, the atmospheric pressure shifts, the storm breaks, the screaming wind dies down to a whistle.
The silence must have been jarring.
The crew unseals the frozen doors of their huts, they kick away the snowdrifts, and they step out into the blinding white aftermath. They look out toward the shoreline to the exact spot where their massive 230-foot steel ship had been locked in the ice, and it is gone.
Completely vanished. It hasn't sunk, leaving a hole in the ice. It hasn't tipped over. It is simply not there.
I can't even imagine.
The initial shock to Captain Cornwell and the crew must have been paralyzing. Your brain literally cannot process the data. How does a 1,300-ton steel structure disappear into thin air?
They must have thought they were losing their minds.
They immediately began a frantic search of the ice pack. They eventually found it, but it was half a mile away from where they had left it.
Okay, stop right there, because this is where my mind breaks.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
If the ice was thick enough to stop a 1,300-ton ship under full steam, how can the storm move that same ship half a mile? That doesn't make sense physically. A ship locked in concrete doesn't just blow away.
It's an incredible display of kinetic energy transfer. We have to look at two factors here: windage and ice dynamics.
Okay, walk me through it.
First, a 230-foot ship has a massive surface area above the ice. The hull, the superstructure, the masts, the funnels. In maritime terms, this is called windage.
So it acts like a sail.
It acts like a massive rigid sail. When hurricane-force winds hit that broadside, it creates thousands of tons of lateral force. Second, sea ice is not firmly attached to the ocean floor. It is floating.
Right, it's just a crust on the water.
Exactly. The sheer force of the wind against the ship, combined with the wind pushing against the entire frozen surface of the ocean, caused the ice pack itself to fracture and slide over the water beneath.
Wait, so it pushed the ice, not just the ship?
The storm didn't just push the ship. It pushed the massive tectonic plate of ice the ship was embedded in, ripping it away from the shoreline and dragging it half a mile out into the darker waters.
The sheer power of the planet is staggering. It's like surviving a monster attack while hiding in a cabin.
That's a great way to put it.
You make it through the night, you step outside when it's finally quiet, and you realize your massive, armored getaway car has been dragged deep into the woods and ripped to shreds. You track it down, but the moment you see the state it's in, your heart drops. You know it's over.
Because the state of the Baychimo was indeed catastrophic. When the crew trekked over the jagged, fractured ice to reach it, they found a shattered skeleton of a ship.
It must have been completely mangled.
The hull had been severely damaged by the grinding pressure during the move. The rudder, the massive steel steering mechanism at the stern, was entirely snapped off.
Meaning they couldn't steer it even if they got it free.
Exactly. meaning the ship could never be navigated again, even if they could somehow blast it free. And the engine room was dead. Captain Cornwell surveyed the twisted metal, the groaning hull plates, and he had to make the ultimate agonizing decision of his career.
He has to order the abandonment of the ship.
He does. And we must understand the weight of that order. In maritime tradition and international maritime law, abandoning a ship is the absolute last resort.
It's admitting defeat.
It is a captain's greatest professional defeat. It is an official declaration that the vessel is totally beyond salvation, that all attempts to save it will only result in the loss of human life, and that the ship is now surrendered to the elements.
So what did they do?
Cornwell ordered the crew to salvage what they could. They spent days pulling the millions of dollars in valuable furs out of the freezing cargo holds, stacking them on the ice. And then they had to turn their backs and walk away.
They just left it there.
They left the SS Baychimo to its watery grave. By every metric of physics, engineering, and centuries of seafaring experience, it was an absolute death sentence for the ship.
So the Hudson's Bay Company arranged a highly risky rescue flight. Small bush planes landed on the ice, they loaded up the crew, they loaded up the incredibly valuable furs, and they flew out.
Looking down from the plane, they must have thought it was the last time they'd see it.
Yeah, looking down from the window, they saw this giant iron behemoth looking like a piece of rusted garbage discarded on the ice. They completely wrote it off. It was a total loss on the ledger. But the ocean apparently had entirely different plans for this vessel.
Because the scientific expectation was that within days, or perhaps a few weeks, the already damaged hull would finally rupture under the shifting ice.
Right.
Water would flood the cavernous holds, and the Baychimo would slip silently beneath the surface, sinking miles down to the abyssal plain. The story should have ended right there in November 1931.
But it didn't.
But the ship did not sink.
And this is exactly where the ghost awakens. We move forward just a few weeks. It's now December of 1931.
Just weeks later.
An Inuit hunter is out on the ice, navigating the desolate, featureless white landscape with his dogs, miles from any settlement. And he spots something impossible on the horizon.
The Baychimo.
It's the SS Baychimo, floating peacefully in the ice pack. But it's 45 miles away from where Captain Cornwell formerly abandoned it.
45 miles in a matter of weeks, dragged through a grinding, lethal ice field, entirely unmanned, without a rudder, without a functioning engine.
It's literally haunting the ice.
The hunter brought the news back, and the Hudson's Bay Company received a report. They were baffled. They were utterly convinced the ship was fundamentally compromised and doomed, but they saw a brief window of opportunity.
Or for the rest of the cargo.
Right. They sent a salvage team back out across the ice to the ghost ship. They boarded it, looted the remaining furs that they couldn't fit on the rescue planes, and once again walked away.
They abandoned it a second time.
They abandoned it for a second time, absolutely certain that this time, with the deep winter fully setting in, it would surely sink.
But it didn't. Between 1932 and 1939, over the next 7 years, this dead, uncrewed ship was spotted 11 separate times by different people across the Arctic.
11 times.
And we need to linger on the most terrifying encounter of all, which occurred in 1932. A Scottish explorer named Leslie Melvin was on a long-distance dog sled trek through the region. He sees the massive black hull jutting out of the ice.
And it doesn't just look at it from afar.
No. Unlike the company men who just rushed on, grabbed the cargo, and ran away, Melvin actually decides to fully investigate. He decides to board the ghost ship completely alone.
Leslie Melvin's eyewitness account is one of the most chilling, visceral documents in modern maritime history. I want you to picture the scene through his eyes.
Set the stage for us.
He is miles from any form of civilization, standing alone on the pack ice. He approaches this towering wall of rusted steel. It's locked on the ice at a slight list, an unnatural angle.
Right.
He finds a frozen, rusted boarding ladder hanging over the side. He physically hauls himself up, rung by freezing rung, over the railing, and steps onto a wooden deck that hasn't felt a human footstep in months.
He steps into a literal frozen time capsule. The details he recorded are just haunting. He walks down the dark, freezing corridors. He pushes open the heavy wooden door to the captain's cabin.
And what does he find?
He finds Captain Cornwell's logbooks and navigation papers still sitting on the desk. perfectly preserved under a thick, sparkling layer of frost.
Like time just stopped.
Exactly. But it wasn't what he saw that unsettled him, it was the sensory details he experienced that really get under your skin.
Right, the acoustics.
He noted in his journals that as he stood in that cabin, the iron walls of the ship were vibrating. They were humming with a strange, low, unfamiliar rhythm. And as he stood there in the dead silence, he was overcome with a chilling, overwhelming, almost suffocating feeling that, in his exact words, the ship was watching him.
If we break down Melvin's account, there are deep physical realities at play here. But those physics only serve to amplify the psychological terror.
What was causing the vibration?
Let's look at the vibrating iron walls and that strange humming sound. What Melvin was experiencing is a textbook example of acoustic resonance and infrasound.
Okay, infrasound.
You have a massive, hollow, 230-foot steel drum, the ship's hull, sitting rigidly in a dynamic ice field. Deep beneath the surface, ocean currents and millions of tons of ice are slowly, constantly grinding against the lower hull.
Oh, and the sound travels up.
Those massive impacts generate low-frequency sound waves. The hollow interior of the ship acts like the body of a cello, capturing those waves and amplifying them.
So the whole ship is ringing.
The steel structure would literally vibrate, sending tremors up through his boots. It would sound and feel as though the ship was breathing or purring like a massive sleeping beast.
Okay, put yourself in his boots for a second. Let's really imagine this. You are completely alone. The temperature is deadly. You are standing in the dead silence of an abandoned captain's cabin. The wood around you is caked in frost.
And the ocean wants to kill you.
You are surrounded by an ocean that actively wants to kill you, and the very walls of the ship are vibrating, humming a low tone directly into your bones. How fast are you running away from that? Because my primal brain is screaming danger immediately, I am climbing down that ladder and never looking back.
And that primal scream is biologically justified. The feeling of being watched, that sudden, crushing paranoia, is a documented psychological response to extreme isolation coupled with infrasound.
Really? The sound causes the paranoia?
Yes. Sound frequencies around 18 to 20 hertz are often below the threshold of human hearing, but our bodies can feel them. These frequencies have been shown in laboratory settings to cause the fluid in the human eyeball to vibrate slightly.
Wait, what? It vibrates your eyeballs?
Yeah, causing visual anomalies like seeing shadows out of the corner of your eye. And they directly stimulate the nervous system to induce feelings of profound dread, sorrow, and panic.
That is terrifying.
Melvin's brain was being assaulted by the acoustic environment of the ship. His mind couldn't reconcile the fact that a machine of this colossal scale was functioning, moving, vibrating, and making noise entirely without human intervention.
The absence of a crew didn't make it feel empty.
The absence of a crew made the ship itself feel conscious and hostile. He fled. He scrambled back down the ladder, got on his sled, and left the ghost ship behind, just like the others.
He escaped. But as these sightings kept piling up 11 times over 7 years, across hundreds of miles of ocean, the conversation among sailors and officials began to shift.
They had to start taking it seriously.
Right. People stopped asking when the Baychimo was going to finally sink and started asking a much more troubling question. How is this physically possible? How is a broken ship surviving the crushing ice year after year?
And this brings us directly to the science of the drift. When pressed for an explanation, oceanographers and maritime scientists pointed to a massive geographical phenomenon known as Arctic drift, specifically the Beaufort Gyre.
The Beaufort Gyre.
We tend to think of the frozen ocean as a static parking lot, but sea ice in the Arctic is a massive, dynamic, moving system.
Like a conveyor belt.
Driven by global ocean currents and prevailing wind patterns, the ice pack slowly but unstoppably rotates clockwise across the top of the world. It's a massive conveyor belt made of ice. The prevailing scientific theory is that the Baychimo became deeply embedded in this drift, locked in a massive flow, and was simply carried along in a giant circle.
I understand the conveyor belt concept. If you put a toy boat on a moving walkway, it moves. But let's build on what you explained earlier.
What about the pressure ridges?
Right. You said earlier that the pressure ridges in this ice crush steel like cardboard. If it's a conveyor belt, it's a conveyor belt made entirely of shifting trash compactors. Why didn't the ice crush the Baychimo, especially since the hull was already severely weakened from that November blizzard in 1931?
That is the crux of the entire scientific mystery. The theory of survival relies on the specific geometry of the ship's hull and a phenomenon called ice lifting.
Ice lifting, okay.
The Baychimo, being built for northern waters, didn't have a perfectly flat, boxy bottom like a modern barge. Its hull had a slight V shape, a curvature.
So it wasn't flat.
The theory suggests that when the massive tectonic plates of sea ice collided and exerted lateral pressure on the ship, the vector of that force didn't push straight inward to rupture the plates.
It pushed down.
Instead, the curvature of the hull redirected the pressure downward, causing the ice to squeeze beneath the ship, physically wedging it upward. So instead of being crushed, the Baychimo was essentially squeezed up and out of the water, cradled securely on top of the moving ice sheet.
Okay, I can see how that makes mechanical sense for a single season. You get lucky with how the ice freezes, the hull pops up like a slippery watermelon seed squeezed between your fingers, and it rides out the winter on top of the ice.
Right, a watermelon seed.
But mathematically, statistically, for a broken, dead ship to survive this chaotic, grinding pressure year in and year out for nearly 4 decades.
It is hard to fathom.
I mean, ice melts in the summer, drops the ship back into the water, and then refreezes violently every single October. The odds of the ice perfectly lifting it every single winter without snapping the keel or rupturing a rusted plate are astronomical. It defies all statistical probability.
It absolutely breaks the predictive models. A maritime engineer would tell you that hull fatigue alone, the constant expanding and contracting of freezing steel, should have shattered the ship within 5 years.
Exactly.
The sheer longevity of its survival cannot be fully satisfied by the ice lifting theory. And that inadequacy of modern science is exactly why the local indigenous populations developed a very different and deeply profound interpretation of what the Baychimo had become.
Yeah, in 1933, Inuit elders who had observed the ship's impossible cyclical journey along the coast declared it officially cursed.
Cursed.
They believed it was trapped in a spiritual limbo. It was caught between the worlds of the living and the dead. The ocean wouldn't let it live as a working ship, but the environment aggressively refused to let it die and sink.
It is a chillingly poetic observation, and it perfectly encapsulates the horror of the situation. The ship was a phantom.
A ghost ship in every sense.
It took up physical space in the material world, it cast a shadow, it rusted, but it no longer belonged to the world of men. It was outside of our jurisdiction.
And the history backs that up.
And what makes that indigenous perspective so incredibly compelling is the historical record. Every subsequent attempt by humans to interact with the ship, to salvage it, or to forcefully bring it back into the world of the living was met with what seemed like active, aggressive resistance from the environment.
Like the ocean was fighting back.
It genuinely seemed as though the ship or the ocean around it was defending itself.
We really need to dive deep into those salvage attempts, because this is where the narrative shifts from a weird scientific anomaly to something that feels actively malevolent. Let's look at 1934.
Captain Pilson.
Captain Hugh Polson, an experienced mariner, spots the Baychimo. Now, bringing in a massive abandoned ship like this isn't just about curiosity, it's about maritime law.
Right. Salvage rights.
If you salvage an abandoned vessel, you are entitled to a massive financial reward based on the value of the ship and its remaining cargo. It's the ultimate maritime prize. Polson sees his early retirement floating in the ice.
He's going for it.
He expertly maneuvers his own ship in to capture it. He is right there. The lines are almost ready to be thrown. And then, completely out of nowhere, a sudden, inexplicable blizzard and a massive, blinding fog bank roll in, dropping visibility to 0 and completely hiding the ghost ship.
And we must note, it wasn't just a general regional change in the weather. The historical accounts and logbooks from these salvage attempts describe these events as incredibly hyper-localized anomalies.
Like a targeted storm.
The weather is clear enough to spot the ship miles away, but the moment they closed the distance to interact with it, the environment violently rejected them. And this wasn't an isolated incident with Captain Polson.
Not at all.
The source documents reveal that at least 5 or 6 different times over the decade, well-equipped salvagers got agonizingly close. They had their eyes on the prize. And every single time, without fail, sudden localized storms, blinding fog, or aggressive rapid ice shifts would physically snatch the Baychimo away at the last possible second.
It builds and builds until it reaches this horrifying climax in 1939. A 7-man crew of seasoned sailors manages to actually track the ship down. And they don't just see it from a distance. They make contact. They physically board it.
7 men on the ghost ship.
7 men walking the decks of this abandoned, rotting ghost ship. They are setting up their equipment. They are planning to rig towing cables and drag it back to port. And then the sun goes down, night falls.
And the weather turns, but it doesn't just turn foul. It becomes life-threateningly violent almost instantaneously.
It's out of nowhere.
We are likely looking at a phenomenon like a severe katabatic wind cold, dense air, rolling off a glacier at hurricane speeds. But the timing is uncanny. The wind begins screaming through the rusted rigging.
The ice shifts.
The sea ice around the hull starts shifting aggressively, threatening to crush their smaller vessel moored nearby. The 7 men suddenly realize they are standing on a dead, freezing ship in pitch darkness, and the ocean is violently tearing the environment apart around them.
They realize in that moment that they are no longer the hunters claiming a prize. They are the hunted.
They had to run.
They have to abandon all their gear, scramble over the side, and flee for their lives, abandoning the massive payday just to survive the night. And one of the surviving sailors later gave a quote to the press that I simply cannot stop thinking about.
What does he say?
He said, "The ship let us go, but didn't want to come with us."
The ship let us go.
Yeah.
That phrasing is so deeply revealing of the human psychological state in extreme conditions. He personifies the vessel.
He gives it a mind.
He attributes conscious agency, desire, and willpower to a decaying metal machine. Obviously, from a strictly empirical scientific standpoint, a 1,300-ton chunk of iron oxide does not have a consciousness. It cannot want anything.
I know. The rational part of my brain knows that science tells us it's just unpredictable weather patterns, it's barometric pressure, thermodynamics, and the chaotic nature of Arctic microclimates. But when you look at the sheer unbroken pattern of the timing of these storms, doesn't it feel like the ocean adopted the Baychimo, like an apex predator guarding its favorite toy? You reach your hand in to try to take the ocean's toy, and it snaps its jaws at you.
It speaks to the visceral terror of a natural world that appears to act with a sinister, protective intelligence. When humans are repeatedly thwarted by coincidental weather, we map intent onto the chaos.
We want it to make sense.
It's the sheer uncaring power of the Arctic manifesting as a guardian spirit for this dead ship. And the 1939 incident was effectively the last major coordinated attempt to tame the Baychimo. Because shortly after those men fled, the entire world fundamentally changed.
That's right. The calendar turns. World War II erupts. The entire globe is plunged into unprecedented chaos, and humanity diverts its eyes from the frozen north to the burning battlefields across Europe, the Pacific, and North Africa.
The world's attention shifted.
Millions of lives are lost. Empires collapse. The atomic age is violently born. But out there in the freezing dark of the Chukchi Sea, thousands of miles from the gunfire and the politics, the ghost ship just kept silently sailing.
Thus begins what we can call the phantom decades. During the 1940s and the 1950s, the Baychimo transcends being a mere abandoned salvage opportunity and elevates into a literal maritime legend.
But a legend you could see.
But it was a legend that refused to stay invisible. It kept leaving undeniable physical proof of its existence. In 1942, right at the height of the global naval war, a U.S. Navy patrol pushing through the northern waters spotted it drifting silently in the pack ice.
And then again in 44.
In 1944, a solitary Canadian fisherman saw it looming out of the mist. It officially earned the Maritime moniker, the ship that won't die.
The juxtaposition of time here is completely wild to me. The entire world is tearing itself apart, developing radar, jet engines, and nuclear weapons, but this 1914 relic is just quietly surviving it all.
Undisturbed by human history.
And that theme of time is perfectly, beautifully captured in an encounter from 1950. An elderly Inupiat woman was standing on the frozen shoreline with her young grandson. She points out across the ice pack, and there, locked in the frozen ocean, is the Baychimo.
And what did she tell him?
She looks down at her grandson and tells him that she had seen that exact same ship when she was his age.
That is a staggering realization of scale. She had lived an entire full human life. She had grown up, experienced joy and sorrow, seen generations pass, seen her culture and the world completely transform around her, and yet there was the ship.
Frozen in time.
Frozen in time, unchanging in its endless loop. It violently highlights the vulnerability, the softness, and the brevity of human flesh when contrasted against the cold, unyielding endurance of the haunted machine.
It's basically immortal.
The ship had outlived its era and become an immortal, rusted fixture of the polar landscape.
But it wasn't completely untouched by the passage of time, which makes the visual reality of the ship even creepier. In 1952, a young, brave fisherman managed to get incredibly close to it in a small boat during the summer melt.
He got right up to the hull.
He was close enough to see the minute details of the hull. He described the steel walls as being utterly consumed by rust. But he didn't just use the word rusty. He described the corrosion pattern on the hull as looking like a map drawn in red blood.
That imagery is profoundly disturbing and chemically fascinating. What he was seeing was decades of iron-3 oxide reacting with the extreme polar environment.
The rust mixing with the weather.
Decades of saltwater spray, grinding ice scraping the paint away, and brutal winds that exposed the raw steel. In extreme cold and moisture, rust doesn't just flake off. Condensation mixes with the rust and runs down the side of the ship, freezing into thick, dark red streaks.
It looks like it's bleeding.
It had etched a gruesome mural onto the side of the dead ship. It literally looked like he was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. It was wearing the scars of its 30-year survival.
And did he try to board it?
And true to form, the legend held up. When that young fisherman tried to navigate his small boat closer, to actually touch that blood-red hull, a sudden, violent, localized gust of wind swept down from the ice pack. It nearly capsized his boat, physically forcing him to retreat.
Once again, the environment violently rejecting human interference. It's like an invisible force field. But, up to this point in the timeline, hardened skeptics sitting in warm offices in London or New York could still argue, oh, it's just fishermen's tales.
It's a tall tale.
It's mass hysteria, an urban legend passed around campfires to scare young sailors. But then we hit the year 1956.
1956 is the year the narrative changes from folklore to undeniable fact. The United States Coast Guard is conducting a routine maritime patrol in the region.
So this is official military tracking.
Their radar operator, sitting in a dark room watching the green sweep of the screen, picks up a massive, solid, anomalous contact. It is not an iceberg.
Because ice looks different on radar?
Ice has a very different radar signature than metal. Steel reflects radar waves intensely, creating a massive balloon on the screen. They investigate the coordinates, they push through the fog, and they visually confirm it. It is the SS Baychimo.
Wow, they literally pinged a ghost ship.
They tracked it mechanically on military radar and filed a formal official government report.
That is the absolute nail in the coffin for the skeptics. That Coast Guard report cements its existence in government archives as an undeniable, physical, 1,300-ton fact.
It's not a myth anymore.
And if you think about it, if a government radar operator tracks a massive ghost ship on their screen, how does that fundamentally disrupt the official understanding of maritime safety? You literally have a massive, unlit, uncrewed, totally silent steel battering ram just wandering freely through the shipping lanes.
It is an absolute logistical and legal nightmare for maritime authorities. Modern maritime navigation entirely relies on predictability, on standardized lanes, on lighted beacons, on transponders, and on continuous human communication.
And the Baychimo has none of that.
The Baychimo was a rogue, chaotic variable in an organized system. A dark, heavy mass that didn't follow the rules of shipping, didn't broadcast a radio signal, couldn't be contacted, and most importantly, couldn't be controlled.
It's a hazard.
It was a severe physical hazard to any vessel navigating those waters at night, but it was also a philosophical insult to the modern era. We had the technology to bounce radio waves off it and track it on a screen, but we were still completely, utterly powerless to stop it, steer it, or catch it.
We are getting into the late 1950s and the 1960s now. Humanity is fully entering the space age. We are strapping human beings to the top of giant rockets and firing them at the moon.
The peak of human engineering.
We are splitting the atom to generate unlimited power. We have satellites orbiting the Earth. And yet, with all of that supreme technological mastery, we still couldn't catch a broken, rusted Swedish trade ship floating in our own oceans.
Which brings us directly to the final, most chilling chapter of the Baychimo's timeline. The year is 1969, March of 1969 to be exact.
Let me set the context here. 1969 is the very year humans landed on the lunar surface. The year we conquered the heavens.
Precisely. It is the absolute pinnacle of human technological achievement up to that point. And in that very same year, an Inuit hunting party is traveling through a highly remote, desolate section of the Alaskan coast.
Then what do they see?
They look out over the frozen expanse, and they come across a massive black steel structure locked tight in the sea ice. It is the SS Baychimo, 38 years after Captain Cornwell legally abandoned it to die.
38 years of enduring dark blizzards, crushing tectonic ice, and absolute crushing isolation.
The hunting party sets up their camp near the ship. They observe it from a distance. The ice pack around the hull looks solid and stable.
So they figure it's safe.
They decide that they will wait out the freezing night, rest, and then board the vessel at dawn to explore it, perhaps to salvage timber or metal that might still be useful. They go to sleep in their tents, with the massive rusted black silhouette of the ship looming over their camp, blocking out the stars.
I want you to really picture waking up the next morning. You open your eyes, you unzip the flap of your tent, you step out into the freezing, crisp dawn air. You look out at the horizon, toward the exact spot where a towering 1,300-ton iron giant had been solidly anchored in the ice just hours before.
Mm.
And you see absolutely nothing, an empty, unbroken white horizon. The ship had vanished completely in the dark.
It didn't just drift away on the horizon, it vanished. From that crisp morning in March 1969, the SS Baychimo was never seen again.
Never seen again.
Not by an indigenous hunter, not by commercial fishermen, not by a military Coast Guard radar sweep, and not by a satellite. It was as if the Arctic Ocean simply opened its icy jaws in the middle of the night and finally, quietly swallowed it whole.
It's so jarring. How does a 1,300-ton steel structure just evaporate overnight without waking the people sleeping right next to it?
It's hard to reconcile.
Did the ocean finally claim it? Did the rusted hull, after 38 years of fatigue, finally shatter and drop to the bottom? Or did a crack in the ice simply open up, let the ship slip through, and seal back over it like it never existed? Because the total lack of closure here is what elevates this from a weird maritime historical anomaly into a legendary horror story.
The human psychological need for closure is incredibly strong. It is exactly why, decades later in 2006, the Alaskan government decided they were finally going to put an end to the ghost stories and solve the mystery.
They launched a search.
The state's underwater unit launched a massive, highly funded, technologically advanced sonar search for the wreck of the Baychimo. They plotted the exact coordinates where it was last seen by the hunters in 1969.
And what technology did they use?
They gridded the ocean floor. They deployed modern, multi-beam echo-sounding acoustics, a technology designed to map the seabed in high resolution and find even the smallest pieces of debris.
I want to understand how that works. Multi-beam sonar paints a picture using sound, right? It should be able to spot a giant pile of steel easily, so what did they find down there in the dark?
They found absolutely nothing. A 1,322-ton steel behemoth had vanished without leaving a single acoustic trace. And we must deeply understand the implications of that technological failure.
Right, because if it sank, it should be there.
Let me explain the physics of a shipwreck. When a ship of that massive size sinks, it does not go quietly or neatly. As it descends into the crushing depths, the air pockets inside the hull implode violently.
So it breaks apart.
The ship tears itself apart. It scatters heavy steel plates, massive iron boilers, miles of anchor chains, and heavy cargo over a massive area of the seafloor. It leaves a dense, highly reflective, highly detectable debris field.
And the sonar would see that.
When sonar waves hit flat sand or mud, they bounce back softly. When they hit a jagged pile of steel engines, they bounce back hard and bright, creating a massive acoustic shadow behind them. The fact that the high-resolution sonar grid found zero evidence of a wreck, just flat, empty seabed, implies something profoundly unsettling.
It means the ship didn't sink where they think it did. The ice must have carried it away before it went down. Or, and this is the theory that actually keeps me up at night,
What if it didn't sink?
what if it didn't sink at all? What if it drifted into the completely uncharted abyssal corners of the Arctic?
That is the leading hypothesis among researchers and historians who refuse to believe a steel ship just disintegrated into atoms. The Arctic Ocean is vast, and beneath the permanent polar ice cap, there are deep, complex current systems and topographies, like the Lomonosov Ridge and deep abyssal basins, that are still largely unexplored by human instruments.
Uncharted territory.
It is entirely physically possible that the Baychimo, locked in an unbreakable, frozen cradle of thick pack ice, was pulled into a dark labyrinth of frozen channels closer to the pole, where humans simply cannot reach and satellites cannot see beneath the ice.
It's down there in the dark, or somehow it's still floating in the pack ice. I mean, we can't completely close the book because in 2012, there was a brief glimmer of something.
A 2012 sighting.
A team of researchers was surveying a highly remote area of the Arctic, far from normal shipping routes, and they caught a brief, blurry visual of a wreck trapped in the ice that perfectly matched the dimensions, the rust profile, and the specific 1914 Swedish build style of the Baychimo. But in classic Baychimo fashion, what happened next?
The environment protected its secret, exactly as it had done since 1931. Horrific, blinding weather conditions descended almost immediately, completely dropping visibility.
Of course it did.
Coupled with a lack of funding, the extreme danger to the crew, and the utter remoteness of the location, any attempt at an extraction or even a closer verification had to be entirely abandoned. They couldn't verify the registry. The ghost ship, if it was indeed the Baychimo, slipped away into the fog once more.
So here we are. Let's look back at this incredible, haunting timeline we've unpacked today. Captain John Cornwell, the man who made the agonizing, career-ending decision to abandon the ship in the blizzard of 1931, died long before 1969.
He never lived to see the end of his ship's story.
The Baychimo outlived its master. It outlived every man in its crew. It outlived the Hudson's Bay Company's dominance of the North. It arguably outlived its entire era of coal-fired industrial history.
It is a stark, undeniable physical reminder of human insignificance on this planet. We build these giant steel monuments to our own ingenuity. We declare ourselves the absolute masters of the globe, capable of taming any environment.
We think we're in charge.
But the ocean can just take our greatest, heaviest creations, lock them in ice, play with them like toys for 40 years, and then swallow them into the dark whenever it chooses. The story of the SS Baychimo represents the ultimate, terrifying triumph of the natural world over human intention.
It really does.
Even today, as we sit here in 2026, with GPS mapping every square inch of the globe and satellites constantly watching the surface from orbit, the Arctic categorically refuses to give up its ghost ship.
It's the ultimate unsolved maritime mystery. And it leaves us with one final, deeply haunting image.
Let's hear it.
The next time you are walking by the ocean at night and the temperature drops and a thick, freezing fog rolls in off the dark water, just look out into the blackness. Imagine a massive, towering, rusted black hull sliding silently through the mist, vibrating with that low, heavy hum. The SS Baychimo was never found. The rational models of science say it must be lying shattered at the bottom of the sea, but science also mathematically proved that it couldn't survive 38 years in the crushing ice. So, where is it tonight?